One of the most famous books in Islam, the most famous hadith compilations, is the Sunan of Imam Abu Dawood. The Sunan of Imam Abu Dawood. And this hadith compilation, this hadith work, composes of, roughly speaking, 4,800 hadith divided into 43 chapters. And Imam Dawood was a great scholar of Islam. He's said to have started his education at the tender age of 10, and he spent his lifetime seeking knowledge, and he's said to have studied with more than 300 teachers. Despite all of this, despite this, Imam Dawood, he made a very interesting statement. He made an amazing statement where he said, I gathered 500,000 reports, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So he collected 500,000 hadith. And then he says, from these 500,000 hadith, I chose 4,800 for my compilation, the Sunan Abi Dawood. But then he says, of these 4,800 hadith, 4 hadith are sufficient for a man's religion. So he's boiling it down for us. He's saying that I collected 500,000 hadith, and from those 500,000 hadith, I'm boiling it down to 4,000, roughly 5,000 hadith. And from those 5,000 hadith, take 4 hadith. What are these 4 hadith that he mentions? What are these 4 prophetic reports that he mentions are sufficient for a man's religion? 4 hadith. And we should all know these 4 reports. The first hadith is that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are by intentions. The second hadith that Imam Abu Dawood mentions, part of the excellence of a man's religion is leaving what doesn't concern him. Part of the excellence of a man's religion is leaving what doesn't concern him. The third hadith is no one truly believes until he is contended for his brother that which he is contended for himself. And the fourth hadith, the lawful matters are clear and the unlawful matters are clear. Between the two are doubtful matters about which many people do not know. Thus, he who avoids doubtful matters clears himself in regards to his religion and his honor. And that this is one of the beautiful aspects or attributes of Islam, is that from one perspective, it's complex, but from another perspective, it's simple. From one perspective, it's very deep, and from another perspective, it's within the grasp of everyone. It can satisfy the most philosophical-oriented mind, just as it can fulfill the needs of the common person. It's one of the beautiful attributes of Islam. So the question is, why these 4 hadith? So after Imam Abu Dawood, he boiled down the prophetic tradition for us, these 4 hadith. Why are these 4 hadith specifically? Why did he mention these 4 prophetic reports of the Prophet ﷺ? And one of the answers to that would be that the first hadith, the hadith teaching us about our intentions, it deals with the person's relationship between him and Allah. It sets the person's relationship between him and God correct right. The second hadith, which is about leaving that which doesn't concern one, deals with it emphasizes the importance of time. And time is your life. So it tells you how to organize your life and organize time. The third hadith, about no one truly believes until they love for their brother what they love for themselves, it deals with the rights of the other. It deals with the rights of brothers, so societal rights. And the fourth hadith, that permissible actions are clear and prohibited actions are clear, the halal and the haram, they're clear, and in between them there's gray matter, and people get confused, and you should try to avoid those gray matters. Is that this hadith serves as a guide through life. It serves as a guide through all the gray areas of life. So with the remaining time, I'd just like to take a quick glance at the first hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said, actions are by intentions. And this hadith, this prophetic report, is narrated from the authority of Umar ibn Khattab, where he says that the Prophet ﷺ said, actions are only by intentions, and each man has only that which he intends. And then the Prophet goes on, and he gives a case study for this hadith. He gives a practical example, where he says that whoever's immigration, his hijrah, was for Allah and His Messenger, then his immigration was for Allah and His Messenger. And whoever's immigration was for some worldly gain which he can acquire, or for someone that he wants to marry, then his immigration is for that which he immigrated to. Imam Shafi'i, the great Imam Shafi'i, he said about this hadith, he said this hadith is 1/3 of all knowledge. He said this hadith is 1/3 of all knowledge, and it enters into 70 sections of fiqh, of jurisprudence. Right? Imam Bukhari, he said about this hadith, he said it's the most expensive gem of the prophetic gems. The Prophet ﷺ in this hadith he's teaching us the perspective that we should have in the world. He's teaching us the correct way that we should view ourselves and we should view our actions. We might think that outward actions are what are significant and what are important, but the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us is that beyond outward physical actions, the default and the foundation is what's in the heart. It's the inward. And the inward, the state of the heart, the state of the intention, is that that's what informs our actions. And ultimately, if our intentions are clean, if our intentions are pure, if we have good intentions, ultimately our actions and our outward will be good and pure and upright. And ultimately, if our intentions, our foundations are not upright, then ultimately our actions will not be upright. So what is an intention? That's a valid question. What is an intention? And an intention is your choice to do something. It's when your heart you have a resolution to perform a certain action. An intention is the why to the action. It's the motivation behind the action. Why are you performing that action? From a more psychological perspective, we can see the intention as a result of our thoughts that go through 4 stages. So the intention is kind of the result of a process, a psychological process. The first stage is that a person gets sudden thoughts. Something comes to his mind out of nowhere. And these in Arabic, they're called khawatir, which is an interesting word because the word khatran means to isolate. It means to change, right? So it kind of tells you the nature of that word is that our thoughts, the thoughts that come into our mind, is that they're oscillating, they're changing, they come and they go. And also, a word that's related to this word of involuntary thoughts is the word khatir, which means dangerous in Arabic. So you can see a correlation between these words and how involuntary thoughts, if we follow them often, they can be dangerous. That's the first process. The second process is after involuntary thoughts, it becomes internal discourse. So you choose to respond to that thought, and if you do, then you discuss it inside of yourself. Should I do it or should I not do it? To be or not to be? To do it or not to do it? From there, it becomes a ham, right? It becomes a decision. And after being a decision, it becomes a firm resolution, and that's an intention. So an intention is the cultivation, the culmination of all these 4 processes. And what the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, what he's teaching us, is that we shouldn't be deceived by the outward. Is that the proper way to look at this is that the intention is the seed, it's the badra, the action is the tree, it's the shajara, and then the reward for that action is the fruit, it's the thamara. And if you look at intentions, there's 3, what are the functions of intentions? So that's what an intention is, but what's the purpose, what's the function of an intention? Is that there's 3 main functions of having intentions. And this hadith encompasses these 3 main functions. Is that the first function is that intentions distinguish between acts of religion, acts of worship, and customary acts. And again, if you look at the Arabic, it's interesting because worship in Arabic is ibadah, and customary acts in Arabic is aada. It's just a matter of adding a ba. If you add a ba, from ibadah it becomes aada. So by making an intention something that's customary, it becomes an act of worship. For example, with one's parents, or with one's spouse, or with one's relatives, is that we should be good. We have to be good to them. But if we make an intention to do that for the sake of Allah, not only is that just a good deed, but that's actually an act of worship by the intention. That's the first purpose of intentions. The second purpose is they distinguish between the various acts of worship. So you might be praying Dhuhr, the midday prayer. You have to make the intention that it's specifically the midday prayer and not the late afternoon, not the Asr prayer. So it distinguishes between the various types of acts of worship. And thirdly, and lastly, more importantly, is that it distinguishes the purpose and the objective behind that action. Is it for Allah or is it not for Allah? Is it for the sake of Allah or for something other than the sake of Allah? With that being said, the scholars, they mentioned 4 important points with regards to our intentions. I just want to touch upon these points. These 4 points, first is being conscious of one's intention. Is that we have to be aware that, as the Prophet ﷺ said, actions are by intentions. That's the first point. The second point is the integrity or the quality or the sincerity of the intention. The third is the degree of the intention. You have a big intention or a small intention. And the fourth is the quantity of the intention. In other words, you can make multiple intentions for a single act. With regards to the integrity or the sincerity, the ikhlas of the intention, that this is the most important aspect. We have to purify our intentions and make them solely for the sake of Allah. There's a hadith, there's a prophetic report narrated in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ, he relates on behalf of Allah, it's Hadith Qudsi, where Allah says, Allah Most High says, I am the most independent of partners from the ascriptions of partnership. He says, whoever does an action in which he associates other than me as a partner with me, then I abandon him to his partner. In another hadith, narrated by Imam Ahmad, the Prophet said, he said, when Allah gathers on the Day of Judgment, the first and the last of all humanity, a crier will call out. He will say, whoever associated a partner in an action which he did for Allah, then let him seek his reward from other than Allah, because Allah is alone and free of partners and He has no need for association. In another hadith, stressing the importance of the sincerity and the purity of our intentions, the Prophet said, he said that people will be assembled according to their intentions. One of the great scholars, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, he says about himself, he says, I have not concerned myself with anything more difficult than my intentions, because they always fluctuate. Another scholar, Yusuf bin Hussein al-Razi, he said, the most difficult thing in this world is sincerity. He says, how I struggle to remove showing off from my heart, yet it grows again in a different corner of my heart. One of the other scholars, Fudail bin Iyad, he says, Allah only wants from you, God only wants from you your intention, your good intention, and your goodwill. That's the first aspect of our intentions, that when we think about improving ourselves and acting upon this hadith, we should look at it from these 4 perspectives. First is the degree or the sincerity of the intention. Second, the depth or the degree, the depth and the degree of the intention is that those who have high intentions will get what they intend for, and those who have low intentions will get what they intended. There's Ibn Mubarak, another quote. He says that many a time a small action is exalted by a big intention, and many a time a great action is lessened by a small intention. There's another hadith, another prophetic report narrated from Nasai and Imam Ahmad, is that the Prophet said that whoever goes on expedition in the way of Allah only intending to acquire a cord to hobble his camel with, he will have what he intends. So in other words, he risks his life, but all he intends is something that's paltry. And because of his low intention, is that that's all he acquires, that's all he gets. In another hadith, the Prophet said, he said, truly most of the martyrs of my nation will be people of the beds, people who die on their deathbed, because they had that intention. And how often someone is killed between the ranks, Allah knows best their intention. Right? So he's talking about a situation where they're defending themselves, they're defending the family, they're defending the religion, and because they don't have that intention, is that that's spoiled for them. The third aspect, as we mentioned, is the multitude or the quantity of intentions. And a quote from Imam Yahya bin Ibn Kathir, where he says that know that intentions, because it is more far-reaching, intentions are more far-reaching than actions. And this other scholar, Zubayr bin Yami, said that I prefer to have an intention in everything, even in drinking and eating. And he also said, make an intention for everything by which you mean good, even in using the washroom. So look at a practical example, is that what are our intentions when we come to Jumu'ah? What are our intentions when we seek knowledge? What are our intentions when we seek to learn? And that there's a multiple of intentions that we can make when we seek for whatever action that we're performing. An example here is that if someone's seeking knowledge, they can make the intention to draw nearer to Allah, to follow the Prophet ﷺ, to learn the individual obligations, to fulfill the communal obligations, to make the foundations of their religion safe and sound, to worship Allah correctly according to knowledge, to bring life to the prophetic teachings, to rectify the community. There's a multitude of intentions that someone can make in just a simple action. And that these three aspects is what we have to focus on, is the sincerity of the intention, the degree of the intention, and the quantity of the intention. الله عز وجل يقول وبقول يهدي المهتدين جل في العلا وإذا قرئ القرآن فاستمعوا له وأنصتوا لعلكم ترحمون وقال عز من قائل الكريم فإذا قرأت القرآن فاستعذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولي الصالحين وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله قائد الغر المحجلين إلى جنات النعيم صلى الله وسلم عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه حق قدر المقدار العظيم وأنا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أما بعد فإني أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله ولا تقل الله يرحمنا الله إن رحمة الله قريب من المحسنين. I just want to end with one last point with regards to intentions, is that we should never underestimate the power of intentions and the effect of intentions. And a practical example of this is the story in the Quran that we find of the mother of Maryam, the mother of Mary. So we know the rank, or we know who the Prophet Jesus was, but where did that glory, or where did that come from? Where did that emanate from? Is that comes from the intention of his grandmother, and her name was Hannah, the mother of Mary. And that we find in the Quran that Allah says in Surah Al-Imran, in verse 35, He says, remember when the wife of Imran, Hannah, said, my Lord, I have pledged to you what is in my womb, devoting it to your service. Please accept my prayer. You are the all-hearing, the all-knowing. So she made this intention that what was in her womb would be solely for the sake of Allah and worship Allah and be devoted to service. And then Allah carries on, where He says in verse 36, when she gave birth, she said, my Lord, I have given birth to a girl. So she was expecting that it would be a son, because usually in those times, those who were devoted to the service of the temple, they were sons. So when she saw that it was a girl, she was surprised. And Allah says, and Allah knew very well what she had given birth to. And then Allah says, a male and female are not the same. In other words, right, the male that she wanted is not the same as the female that Allah gave me. And Allah's choice is better than what she wanted. And then she says, and I have named her Mary, and placed her and her children in your safeguarding from the accursed devil. And then in 42 Allah continues and talks about the rank of Mary. And then when the angel said to Mary, Allah has chosen you and purified you, and He has chosen you over all women. So we should never underestimate or belittle intentions. And we don't know the intentions or the effect of the intentions. They say that Imam al-Ghazali, his father, was a poor man, but he loved the scholars, and he didn't have knowledge himself, but the same thing, he made the intention that if he has children, his children will be from amongst the scholars. And his children, both his sons, Imam Muhammad al-Ghazali and Ahmad al-Ghazali, they became amongst the greatest scholars of Islam through the blessing of his father's intention. And I'll just end with one more quote from Sayyidina Umar, where he summarizes everything. And he says that the best of actions is to perform what Allah has made obligatory, to be cautious of what Allah has forbidden, and to have a true intention for that which is with Allah. قال الله تعالى في كتاب الكريم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم، واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. اللهم ثبتنا على الإسلام، نور قلوبنا ونور بنور الإيمان. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. وأقيموا الصلاة.